This is day 4 of the July 88 7-day retreat. Since several things have come up in meetings about what was said yesterday, about practice and concentration, there'll be a few more words about it. And let us not think this is for the people who are concerned with practice. I'm not concerned with that or beyond that or so. But usually what we talk about touches all of us at one level or another, if one is open to observe how one thinks, how one listens. And also please remember that what is said now about a question in a meeting is not a verbatim rendition of it. So don't feel misunderstood if you are not quoted verbatim. One person said, what seems to be happening here is that you're making a new rule. First, where I practiced, there was the rule, do this and this and this, following the breathing, counting it and so forth. And now your rule is, don't practice. This is how we hear when we don't listen. It's universal. It's not a personal thing with one person. If we don't listen completely with our schemes of listening, our listening programs in abeyance, then we hear according to the way the brain is conditioned to think. And the brain is conditioned to think in opposites. If not this, then one automatically concludes, or thought concludes, then it must be the other. It's so vital that we become aware of this in our daily life. How we jump to the opposite automatically. That we don't seem to be able to think but in opposites. If she says, don't use a practice which she doesn't even say, then she must mean, no, then this must be a rule. If there's a rule to practice, there must be a rule not to practice. If there's a rule to concentrate, then there must be a rule not to concentrate. What is done here seems to be so radically different, which is to question what we're doing. Not to say do this or do that. Don't do this, but do the opposite of it. We're not saying that. And there's no rule about what anybody does when they sit down or walk. Anybody who wishes to count their breathing or experience inhalation, exhalation, or voice a mantra, there's no rule that says you can't do that. This is up to you. It's not my concern what you do. My concern is to look at and clarify as we're talking and looking what happens in the mind as there is a repetitive or compulsive practice. In which there's already the determination to do that. There's a motive for doing it. One wants to attain a quiet state of mind or a blissful state of mind, maybe enlightenment. And because of that goal, there is the motive to engage in a practice. I don't need to go into all of that. Most of us been through that and only need to look at that ourselves. The question has come up, what's wrong with focusing the mind on something? I always do this. Many people tell me that. I always focus on something at the beginning of sitting down, usually my breathing, because the mind is so chaotic. And then later on, I let go of it and attend. If that's what you do, that's what you do. I didn't say there's something wrong with it. All I'm questioning is, are we ever in touch with the chaotic mind? Really in touch with it. Not escaping from it, trying to quiet it, tranquilize it, be rid of it, which we can't. Because the more we try, the more there's added to it in one way or another. The self, which is at the center of chaos, adds more to be rid of itself, at least its unpleasant manifestations. It's not concerned about its pleasant manifestations, to get rid of those. It's not concerned about that. It's been interesting to me that people who come here after years of having practiced maybe on a koan or on a certain mantra, maybe years ago left the place or the practice, tell me, even now, when anger arises or fear manifests, I say that mantra or I voice that koan. Why am I doing that? Is it in order not to be in touch with the fear and the anger? When one begins to question in that way, then one will observe both the conditioned way of pushing something aside, cutting it off, ridding the mind temporarily of a disturbing thought / feeling / emotion. And in doing that, not contacting it, being intimate with it, maybe for the first time. But such a question is this what I'm doing? Is this what's happening? Is the opening to contacting what disturbs human beings daily, deeply, since time immemorial. Fear, anger, loneliness, greed, ambition, competition, wanting to get someplace, climbing the ladder, and the fear of failing, of not being any good, the depression about being a loser. When will we touch that without any escape, as not escaping from it, but profoundly being with it? without already knowing it. Because this is what happens. One can observe it if there is astute alertness, awareness. It is observable that the moment something comes up in the mind, there's already the label. This is fear, this is anxiety. And with that label comes all the previous knowledge of what fear has been in my life, what anxiety has felt like, what its progression is, how horrible it has been, how intolerable. With that label, with that recognition, comes all our past knowledge and reaction and recorded feelings about that. It's in one network of association. This is how the brain and nervous system is built and functions. And what we're asking here is, can whatever a thought has triggered, a rush of anxiety or panic or fear or anger, it doesn't matter what it is that has been triggered. Instead of pushing it away, labeling it, recognizing it, knowing it, and using learned means to push it away, whether something different can happen. Something coming up and not recognized. Maybe the recognition is stirring. There is a pause, a time lag between a perception and the appearance of the recognition of the word. It does not happen simultaneously, as it takes a while for the conduction of electricity, chemicals, or whatever the process is. And in that time lag, attention can function. How that appears, where it comes from, I cannot say. I don't know. But if it's there, then the anxiety, the fear doesn't even arise. Because there's attention. That is not a technique. But most of the time, that moment is missed. The thought brings the association, the recognition, the feeling, and so forth. And then this mass of emotion, which has its sensations too, pain, tension, solar plexus, or the chest, the stomach, the abdomen, the muscles, the heart, the breath. And the senses themselves are affected when there's fear, anxiety, or anger. We're just using those two. One cannot openly listen when one is angry or afraid. One listens in terms of the anger or the fear. And what comes through is screened or shaded, tinted by the emotion that is prevailing. One cannot think clearly either when one is angry or afraid. The thinking process is affected by the prevailing emotion. This is all observable by each one of us. So as the emotion is in progress, the physical feelings and so forth, can observation set in rather than trying to get rid of this thing. Knowing it, and with the knowing, recreating it. Maybe we'll come to another question which comes up in meetings, which is, what do you mean by questioning? I'm not clear, I'm confused of what you mean when you say to question something, to question fear or anger or the conventional use of the word questioning is asking a question and giving an answer. Or asking a question and searching for the answer. There seems to be a scanning process in the brain to scan for the appropriate answer, explanation, or whatever. In spiritual practice, questions are used repetitively. If one is interested in finding out who one is, one will voice who on every exhalation. Also, if one has done that, using this who to cut off thoughts or feelings that may arise. And so creating a vacuous mind. Oh, that's not easy. It's not easy to do that. There's constant problems with it. Because constantly there are thoughts and emotions which interrupt the whole who process and are felt in a conflicting sort of a way. This is not what should happen. I shouldn't have all these thoughts, and of course it happens here too. People tell me there's the constant judgment of thoughts being there and the immediate feeling I shouldn't have these thoughts. I should be attentive. So in questioning we do not mean to raise a question and then stick that question, as so often is said, to your forehead or to the tip of your nose or someplace. Stay with that question. Keep it in mind. Keep thinking about it or voicing it. There's nothing repetitive or mechanical meant by questioning. What is meant by it, if we can look at it right now, this is what I'm doing. I have not prepared this. We're looking at this together. Starting where we do start. What does it mean to question? Instead of wanting to get rid of anger, one may wonder, what is anger or what is fear? How does it arise? How does it manifest itself? How does it affect the whole organism? Or what are its consequences? One genuinely, not because somebody here in this room raises the question, but oneself wants to find out about it. Not from past knowledge, which is incomplete memory, but as it happens. And if that question is real to one, there's a passion for finding out what is anger or what is fear, then in the light of this question, one will listen and look. when it comes up, without immediately saying, oh, I know that from yesterday or 5 years ago or my whole life long. It is a change of the state of mind from knowing to not knowing, wondering and not relying or trusting one's past knowledge about it, or what one has read in books about it, or remembers famous people having said about it. It is the switch from depending on memory and knowledge and scanning for more of that to not knowing, and therefore open, vulnerably open and touch what's there. Sensitive to the subtle escapes that have become habit of moving away, bracing against it, not wanting it. If one becomes aware of these subtle escapes or bracings, they melt away because one wants to find out. One is wondering. And one realizes that the bracing is against something one knows from the past. If one doesn't know what this is, and wants to find out, one wouldn't brace against it, would one? But our whole behavior is one continuous automatic succession of habits which have to be lit up, illumined in awareness, or else they run automatically. It's amazing to find. And liberating to discover, because the moment it's discovered, really seen, it doesn't have to continue. One doesn't have to brace against hurt, pain, fear, anger. It's amazing. One doesn't have to do that. One can be that without any separation. In a new way which is so revealing. It does not threaten one's life at all. On the contrary, it opens up ancient tensions and closures, knots. Just by being with them, not running away, not remaining with what one knows about this state, which is not the truth. The truth of this moment is what this is, and what is it? I have to find out. Touch it, not as a separate thing, as all myself. Myself that is fearing, aching, angering, wanting. All the multitudinous manifestations of this feeling of self. Me. So, questioning is not looking for an answer, it is looking. It is just looking, listening, without this whole backlog of knowledge about my states, my hurts, my inability to survive these hurts. That's knowledge, that's idea, assumption, but maybe completely false. To one's surprise, one can find out that hurts are entirely survivable, particularly if one understands at a glance what it is that gets hurt, which is always the self-image. My idea of what I am, how I should be treated, how my ways should be respected, carried out, not crossed. And this whole, we talked about it once, the whole accumulation of past hurts does not have to come into operation if there's complete attention given to this present hurt. If it's felt and understood, not intellectually understood, but immediately, without any words. I often talk with parents who discuss problems with children. More about teenagers it is than little children. Little children are different problems. It's just the burden of being with them all the time. But a big problem to parents, which I remember well from the past, is when a child calls one all manner of names, addresses one or makes exclamations to one which one would have never dreamt, about, would have addressed to one. And then so often the attempt by the parent to tell the child, if you're to stay in this house, you cannot use these words anymore. Cannot address me like this. I'm your mother. I'm your father. And the hurt, it hurts. Until you wonder why it hurts, you just ache and pain in this hurt of somebody calling you something or other. It's as though an arrow had hit, where it's soft and tender inside. And so much is in that hurt. How can you do this to me? I am your loving mother. I've never called you any names when one thinks or says. But how do we remember what we have called our children, what we've said to them, which was deeply hurtful or humiliating, maybe in front of others? We don't remember. Maybe we do remember isolated instances, but this day in and day out, 24 hours a day life with children, what all we must have said and done to them. And now comes back at us. Particularly in this country, there may be other countries where this is not happening because it is a strict behavioral code. Although one hears that the lamentation that behavioral codes are breaking down everywhere. So said Socrates already. So, just as amazing as this hurt is, which is a genuine hurt, when a barrage of words comes at one, just as amazing is it when, after having examined this, looked at it, clarified it, one day there comes this word again, and one doesn't feel hurt. And it's not one has inured oneself, it's not that one has grown a callous. It's actually a good word, isn't it? One becoming sort of callous, thick skin. No. It's just that one has dropped these images which get hurt. And now there's nothing to get hurt. It's just listening. And maybe seeing this person who's in some kind of agony or rage or misery for the first time, without any desire to retaliate or threaten or pout, make him feel guilty till he comes around again, which he doesn't, he didn't. Then, this is the beginning of a new life together. Do you see that? That instead of old images, old hurts, and old retaliations, paying back, getting back at a person, there is something new, something fresh. The ability to respond wholly, completely, from this instant. Seeing the person, and maybe what one says or doesn't say will have an effect. Maybe it doesn't. One doesn't do it in order to have an effect. It doesn't come from that center. It comes from something new, which is love, which has no basis of bargaining. I love you, but you better also love me, or else we're going to be in trouble with each other. So as one gets angry or hurt or fearful, the chaoticness of it, thought flitting around, feelings, emotions aroused, the senses not operating fully, thought not thinking clearly. In the midst of this tornado, can one wonder what it is all about? listening, attending, and not just going with habitual, old-fangled responses, but wondering about them as they manifest, wondering whether it has to continue this way, and having no conclusion about it, yes it does or no it doesn't, being totally open to be with it, no matter how painful or frightening or embarrassing. What is it that gets hurt, that gets angry, that gets afraid? What is it? Now when it happens, not in the past when it happened. And also listen to all the commentaries that the mind has programmed in itself. I have a right to be angry. I have a good reason to be afraid or to be angry. I'm justified to feel hurt. This is the one side of the comments. Conflicting with that is also programmed into the mind. I shouldn't get angry. I shouldn't be hurt. I must not be afraid. I must overcome all of that. And the conflict between these two kinds of programs, commands, or statements. Neither of them, none of them helping to really see anger or see fear. Not as a separate seer, but that just being there as it is. What is it all about? We will end here for today.